Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, our mission is very laser focused. We are diving deep into one single comprehensive argument.
That's a big one.
It is. It links decades of American social decline directly to trade policy. And it proposes a pretty radical solution that's centered on strategic tariffs.
The source for this is from excerpts of Andy Bozeman's work, Tariffs, Rebuilding America's Foundation.
Right. Why tariffs will forge a stronger future. And you might think, okay, this is just another policy debate, but Bozeman makes it really personal.
He really does. He argues that the true cost of agreements like, NAFTA was the near extinction of a very specific and, in his view, crucial economic group.
That's really the crux of it. We're unpacking his whole historical and really sociological narrative.
Yeah, and his claim isn't just that trade agreements slowly chipped away at jobs.
No.
He says they triggered a sudden, rapid catastrophe for a group he elevates to almost mythic status, the middle class.
Okay, so let's unpack that definition, because it's highly charged language. He doesn't just call them the middle class.
No, it's very specific.
He calls them the core, the backbone, and I think the most powerful one is the anvil on which the fortunes of every great and wealthy nation are forged.
That's some high-stakes framing.
Yeah.
It suggests if that anvil breaks, the entire nation fails.
Exactly. So he provides specific parameters for you, the listener, if you're trying to put some hard numbers on this.
Well, the middle class, he says, generally earns between 2/3 and double the U.S. median household income.
Okay.
So if we look at current stats, for a household of three, that's roughly, $52,000 up to about $156,000 a year?
That is a massive income bracket. I mean, a huge range. So the job type must be the critical differentiator here. What are we talking about vocationally?
We're talking about the economic center of gravity.
Yeah.
People in semi-professional roles, highly skilled tradespeople, lower-level management, specialized admin positions.
Okay, so the core.
The core. Their common characteristics are stable livelihoods, a comfortable but not, lavish standard of living. And crucially, they value independence, hard work, and predictability. Before the mid-90s, they were often defined by home ownership, usually with a mortgage they could reliably pay off.
And Bozeman's whole point is that this group, this bedrock of stability, was at its historic pinnacle right before NAFTA took effect in 1994.
Yes. They were financially healthy, rooted in stable jobs in factories, steel forges, mills, places where your wage increases were actually linked to national prosperity. The system, in his view, was fundamentally sound.
So a very clear picture, financial health from secure, high-paying, and often single-earner jobs.
Yes, and then the narrative pivot is just jarring. He shifts from this pinnacle to a period of what he basically calls economic warfare against this group.
And this is where the most extreme claim comes in. Bozeman argues that the middle class was decimated, almost to extinction.
In less than 7 years.
In less than 7 years. He calls it an almost complete backslide of more than 2 centuries of progress. I mean, that is an incredibly aggressive timeline. How does he justify the speed of that collapse?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And he tries to answer it through his own observation, not just statistics. His contention is that this wasn't slow erosion.
A sudden shock.
It was a sudden shock. He argues the trade agreement fundamentally restructured the incentives for American manufacturing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was cheaper, instantly, to move operations elsewhere.
So he's describing a massive capital flight, a supply chain evaporation that moved way faster than traditional economic cycles.
Precisely. His view is that the slow dwindling of jobs, the mill closing down the street, the factories ceasing operations, that was the visible result.
The symptom.
The symptom. But the cause was instantaneous. Removing tariffs and trade protections made foreign production the most obvious business decision. He calls this the direct result of NAFTA, and the human cost is the evidence he really focuses on.
The most visceral evidence he gives is from his own life, from his own background. He's been drawing house plans since 1974, which is like a real-time economic barometer. Tell us about the change he saw in his clients.
It's an incredibly effective anecdote. Bozeman recalls that before this decline, his middle clients were constantly investing in their homes.
Right.
He drew hundreds of plans for major additions. I mean, not just a deck, but significant architectural projects.
Like what?
Adding a second floor or a 2-story addition across the entire back of the house.
Yeah.
Things that effectively tripled their original square footage.
Wow. So he's using architectural plans as a direct, tangible metric of deep financial stability. and long-term optimism.
Exactly. A family doesn't budget for tripling their home unless they believe their income is rock solid for the next, 30 years.
And these were single-earner households feeling that secure.
That's secure. They're putting down permanent roots.
Right.
And then the jobs evaporated. Bozeman notes the commissions for those big additions, they just stopped. The financial rug was just pulled out from under them.
And the consequence of that was this massive social shift.
According to Bozeman, yes. Single-earner households suddenly required two incomes, and that took parents away from what he calls the critical discipline of personally raising the children.
And it gets worse.
It does. He notes that as the crisis deepened, the children themselves were forced to get jobs just to help meet basic household expenses. So this shifts the whole economic discussion from GDP numbers to, family sacrifice.
It completely reframes the trade agreement as a moral battle, which he explicitly connects to history, right? He quotes the North American Review from around 1900.
Yeah, noting the recurring struggle between the greedy rich against the ordinary folk.
So what's fascinating here is that the severity of his diagnosis dictates the severity of his proposed cure.
Right. If NAFTA caused this near extinction, then for him, strategic tariffs are the only viable mechanism for survival.
So let's get into the prescription then. Bozeman is clear he isn't arguing for, blanket protectionism or isolationism. It's a targeted strategic recalibration. What's the fundamental mission of these tariffs?
The mission, as he argues it, is purely to level the playing field.
Okay.
When a country has, say, no environmental regulations, pays extremely low wages, or unfairly subsidizes industries, they have an artificial advantage over U.S. producers. So by imposing a tariff, he argues you just offset that cost differential.
Which means the foreign-produced goods suddenly cost as much, or maybe even more than American-made goods.
And that's the incentive.
To bring manufacturing back, reopen factories, hire skilled labor, breathe life back into those hollowed-out communities.
Exactly. The idea is that tariffs act as a catalyst for domestic reinvestment. And the benefits, he contends, are exponential. It creates a stronger manufacturing base, fosters innovation.
And drives demand for raw materials and all the supporting industries, from logistics to software.
And he also emphasizes the social benefits, which he sees as profound.
Stronger families, right?
Stronger families built on stable, well-paying jobs, which leads to better investment in children's futures and ultimately a renewed sense of national purpose.
But this, of course, brings up the most immediate and frankly painful counter-argument. Consumer prices.
Of course.
You always hear that tariffs mean higher costs for everything from milk to homes. So how does Bozeman deal with that very real resistance to diminished buying power?
He acknowledges it head-on. He says there will be initial adjustments, there will be some temporary inflation, but he argues that just focusing on that short-term price tag, you're missing the forest for the trees.
And that forest is the long-term benefit.
Exactly. His calculus is that if American workers have higher, more stable wages, which is the ultimate goal of all this, that increased purchasing power will eventually overwhelm the temporary price spikes.
So the goal is to get back to a state where people can keep the money they make and see their children doing demonstrably better than they did.
Right. So he's asking a listener to accept immediate widespread price pain for the promise of long-term economic stability and higher wages. That's a very difficult ask in our consumer-driven economy.
It is, but for Bozeman, the choice is necessary. The alternative, cheap goods but unstable livelihoods, has already caused the social catastrophe he's been defining.
And that leads directly into the political dimension, which is just inextricably linked to this economic pain.
Right. So Bozeman notes this crucial trait of the middle class. They are politically active.
Sorry.
And they play a significant but quietly under the radar role in shaping societal trends.
And this is where the source connects that economic distress to a deep, deep political alienation. Bozeman claims the frustration of the class wasn't just from losing jobs, it was from what he calls demeaning rhetoric and feeling entirely dismissed by coastal elites.
And Bozeman, he intentionally contrasts the economic devastation with these political slights. Now, we have to impartially report the specific examples he cites in the source.
Yes. The source points to Hillary Clinton calling them deplorables, Joe Biden calling them garbage, and Barack Obama's 2008 remark about voters who cling to guns or religion.
Bozeman's narrative strategy is pretty clear here. He portrays this group as a highly intelligent but misunderstood victim.
He argues that they possess determination, fortitude, wisdom, that they're street smart and well-read, but were just politically marginalized. Their collective hard-earned wisdom, according to the source, is that jobs have to come back to America, period.
And this collective anger, the pissed offness, as he puts it, is what Bozeman presents as the key political driver of the modern era.
Which leads to his central and I'd say highly provocative political claim.
That this group formed the irresistible movement almost wholly responsible for electing Donald Trump in 2024.
That is a very specific and powerful claim, so we have to ask, what evidence does he provide to back that up, to show this specific group was almost wholly responsible for the outcome?
Well, he doesn't provide specific polling data linking every single tariff-supporting voter back to this income band. His evidence is more based on the anecdotal power of the movement's messaging. He argues that the focus on restoring American manufacturing, on prioritizing domestic jobs, speaks directly and almost exclusively to the economic trauma this group experienced post-NAFTA. Tariffs were the solution they had been waiting for.
So it's a narrative that really centers their economic grievances as the single most decisive political factor.
Yes, and he uses this conclusion to issue this remarkable win-win-win political call to action all through tariffs.
Okay, so how does he frame this as being good for every major political player?
For Democrats, he argues that supporting tariffs is the only way to genuinely bring back those long-vanished manufacturing jobs, which is essential to winning back their old voter base in the industrial heartland.
And for Republicans.
For Republicans, he argues they should support tariffs because historically, affluence, that self-made, raised-by-your-own-bootstraps affluence, tends to lead naturally to a conservative political lean.
So he sees tariffs not just as economic policy, but as the political key required to restore national stability and consensus.
Exactly. The core conflict he outlines is a stark choice. You either accept the sickly livelihoods and social decay caused by a system that prioritizes cheap goods,
which he identifies as NAFTA.
or you embrace the economic stability and domestic reinvestment offered by strategic tariffs.
And he closes the argument by giving some context. He notes that the current overall U.S. economy might look massively healthy by traditional metrics, and that capitalism is naturally opportunistic.
Right.
But as the individual components, the people of this middle class, are not doing well, then the collective health is just an illusion, and it's unsustainable.
That brings us back to you, the listener, and Bozeman's ultimate challenge. He makes this call for multi-generational planning.
Yeah, he says to save way ahead now, to prepare for the future now, to think about the distant future now, so that generations from now, the benefits of those laborers here and now will be valuable to those people then.
It really forces you to consider the trade-off he's proposing.
It does. Is that immediate, painful sacrifice of personal buying power, accepting higher prices today, is that a viable or necessary trade-off for the promise of national stability and domestic job security decades down the line? It's a real challenge to traditional economic thinking that prioritizes short-term consumer welfare above everything else.
Food for thought indeed. That was a deep dive into Andy Bozeman's argument for strategic tariffs and the forgotten middle class. We'll see you next time.